How does an encounter with Christ heal our wills and purify us? When I talk about God healing our wills, I am referring to the works of Maximus the Confessor, who is reflecting on the story in the Gospels of the Garden of Gethsemane, where Christ surrenders his will to the will of the Father. And what Maximus sees here is that all human rebellion, all defiance, all sin, every time I turn from love, in other words, when I turn from love of God and neighbor, that can seem like a free will decision, but it's not entirely a free will decision if I'm deceived. Somehow, when I come to believe lies that make me resistant to the good, I've introduced a dysfunction in my will. So you could imagine it this way: only a dysfunctional will would turn from the perfect good. Only a dysfunctional will would think that love is bad and that harm is good. And so what we've often called free will, sort of a free will rejection of God, is really more a dysfunctional will rejection of God. He called it the gnomic will, but we weren't made that way. When God created us, what Maximus calls the natural will is that we were created to naturally always desire the good. We were created to always desire love and to turn towards love, and that this would be obvious to us, and that we could freely and willingly always say yes. Somehow we got it in our heads that, well, maybe sometimes saying no is freedom. That's where we're broken. So then what happens is, when we encounter Christ, either in this life in part or in the next life face to face, what happens is that natural will to always desire the good can be restored in us. The dysfunction and the deception and the seduction of the world, the flesh, and the devil get washed aside by the gaze of Jesus Christ and the passion in his eyes for us. So if I start in the future, if we start with the final judgment, and I see Jesus Christ face to face, and I realize without distraction, denial, or deception that he is the perfect good and he is love, to see him face to face in that way, what Maximus is positing is that the world, the flesh, and the devil, that their deceptions and distractions won't even be present in that moment, and that we'll just kind of get it. And you see this in the Apostle Paul in 2 Corinthians 3. He seems, and 4, especially 4, he is reflecting, I think, on his own conversion. And he said, that the God of this age has blinded the minds of unbelievers so they cannot believe. But then the God who said, "Let there be light," has said, "Let there be light" in our hearts. And what happens is he opens the eyes of our hearts to behold the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. When that happened to Paul on the road to Emmaus, he instantly went from, "I hate Jesus Christ," to Lord, this surrender and submission. And it's not that he was coerced into it or forced to believe. It's just that he got it. He finally saw. Here's my hope, that in Revelation chapter 1, Jesus says, "And every eye shall see me." And in Philippians 2, the implication is that when every eye shall see him, every knee will bow and willingly, joyfully confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, just as Paul did. Just as a footnote, as I said, this was all rooted in the work of Christ. We typically think of what Christ did for us at the cross in terms of forgiveness of sin. But I see what Maximus is doing is saying he also creates a foundation of healing our wills in the Garden of Gethsemane, when as a human he surrenders his will to the will of his Father. And it's not when he says, "Not my will but yours." He's not saying my will is one thing and yours is another. He's just saying my will is surrendered to yours. I'm aligning my will with yours on behalf of humanity, so that we can all do that. That seems to happen in part when we hear the gospel in a clear way in this life. And I'm hopeful that that will happen for all when we encounter Christ at the final judgment, that judgment will be a judgment of the lies and deceptions and distractions and denial that have kept us from knowing God. When we see him face to face, First John says we will be like him. That's interesting, whatever that means.